Tonight, prosperity and peace.
Let us bring forth the blessings of a new Middle East.
The Israeli Prime Minister outlines his Mideast vision before the United Nations. Plus, the humanitarian crisis at the border.
There's no end in sight. We don't know, when it's going to end.
And the plight of working moms.
They were valued less and scrutinized and penalized for having children instead of just being celebrated.
How corporate America and the church can offer a better way forward. All this and more on Faith Nation. New optimism and a pathway for peace in the Middle East. Welcome to Faith Nation. From our CBN studio in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's message to the UN General Assembly outlining a vision of peace and an agreement with Saudi Arabia set to usher in a new Middle East. The speech on the heels of the Israeli PM's meeting with President Biden earlier in the week, where the president vowed to work with Israel to establish relations between the Arab and Israel states.
There's no question. The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel. It will enhance the prospects of peace with the Palestinians.
Netanyahu praised the U.S.-led effort in the peace talks while also stressing the world needs to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. So joining us now to talk more about Netanyahu's speech is Rabbi Abraham Cooper. Rabbi, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to get your take on the speech. Netanyahu sounded very optimistic about the peace talks, but Saudi Arabia has made it clear that a Palestine solution needs to be part of the peace discussions. Is that a hurdle that you think Israel can get over?
It's a really good question, and I agree with you. I was pleasantly surprised by, how upbeat Netanyahu's speech was, and that also the hall responded numerous times with applause, which I found to be pleasantly shocking. Look, I think that, and I go to the Gulf quite often. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've been involved with the UAE, with Bahrain. And I think insofar as the Arab world is concerned, not in terms of rhetoric at the UN, but in terms of reality on the ground, they've lost patience with the Palestinians. This has been going on for decades. They pour in a lot of money, and nothing ever really seems to change. So lip service, they're ready to give. As far as a lot more cash or political capital, not really, not when they have the existential threat of Iran that's over there. So on the one hand, yes, Israel has to show and do more to indicate that it's going to try to do more to bring the Palestinians to the peace table. And on the other hand, I don't believe at the end of the day it's going to be a deal breaker. It may take a little bit longer, but I think the issues here are much broader. Let me give one particular issue that most folks don't think about, and that is that for all of the riches with the black gold underneath the Gulf and Saudi Arabia, the untold wealth, one of the most important needs for everyone in the region are jobs for young people. And I think there is a real sense of hope that if you can combine Israeli know-how with the deep pockets of some of these countries, that they can begin to create a sense of hope that there's a real future for their own youth. This is a big game changer. And I don't think they're going to allow the Palestinian issue to get in the way of that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about the jobs in the area. Netanyahu used the red marker to draw a line from Saudi Arabia to Europe, kind of representing a new a trade route. So what do you think a peace agreement like this could mean for the area?
Well, I think he wasn't exaggerating when he said it's going to it could impact positively in the lives of everyone from India to Europe. It creates new supply chains. Obviously, no one mentioned the word China, but new ways of, new possibilities of places where things can be manufactured, and faster and multiple ways to be able to deliver back and forth from Asia, across the Gulf and the Arabian area, through Jordan and Israel, both of whom would gain a tremendous amount. And when you also factor in the gas and the oil that's in the Eastern Mediterranean, if we're lucky, our children and grandchildren won't really recognize the neighborhood anymore, because for the first time in probably 100 years, economic planners and politicians and businesses around the world could look with some normalcy at the map in that arena and say, great, so we'll just have this pipeline and it'll go through 4 countries, including former enemies. So it's a huge deal changer. But there's one other thing that also wasn't talked about in great length, which I have been somewhat involved with. For decades, Saudi Arabian trained imams were bringing the message of Jew hatred to mosques all over the world. And that has already begun to change over these previous years. So the idea that we're able to actually drain one of the swamps of anti-Semitism and change it, that would be terrific.
I hate to cut in. We appreciate your expertise on the subject. Obviously, some very lofty goals from the speech and some lofty expectations. Thank you so much for the time.
Okay.
A new office on gun violence prevention. It's the first of its kind on the federal level, and President Biden says it's just the latest effort by his administration to keep communities safer. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joins us now with the details. Caitlin.
Matt, according to the White House, the new office will focus on implementing executive and legislative action. Over the course of his presidency, Biden has announced dozens of executive orders aimed at preventing gun violence. And last summer, he signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law. Now, he says his administration is taking it one step further.
After every mass shooting, we hear a simple message: do something. Please do something. Do something. Well, my administration has been working relentlessly to do something.
Vice President Kamala Harris will oversee the new office, and one of President Biden's policy advisors, Stephanie Feldman, will serve as the director. While critics call the move an attack on Americans' rights and ineffectual strategy for reducing violence, gun safety advocates say the office will help the administration coordinate on gun policy issues across the federal government.
The office will increase coordination between states and ensure proper implementation of the gun safety legislation that we have already passed in Congress.
Meanwhile, President Biden says he will continue pushing Congress to pass stricter gun laws, like an assault weapons ban and background checks for all gun sales.
We have to act. We have to act now. And let me be very clear. If members of the Congress refuse to act, then we'll need to elect new members of Congress that will act. The safety of our kids from gun violence is on the ballot.
Biden's announcement today comes as his presidential re-election campaign ramps up, and many believe this new office will give him a greater opportunity to point to his action on gun safety and get the support of younger voting blocs. Matt?
Caitlin, thank you. House Republicans are heading home after another failed vote on a bill to fund the Defense Department after 5 key GOP lawmakers blocked the measure over demands for more spending cuts. House Speaker McCarthy calling a long weekend with a possible government shutdown just 8 days away.
I had 2 people flip, so I got to figure out how to fix that.
This is a whole new concept of individuals that just want to burn the whole place down.
Even if Republicans in the House are able to pass a short-term bill, it's set for a roadblock in the Senate, where senators are pushing for a so-called clean CR, with the addition of disaster aid and a supplemental package for Ukraine. Mark Hamrick is a senior economic analyst and the Washington bureau chief at Bankrate. Mark, I'm sure you're getting ready for a shutdown. So first off, we could see it here in just a matter of days. What do you make of the political dysfunction here, especially in light of the major credit rating downgrade by Fitch this summer, knocking the U.S. down from its AAA rating?
Yeah, Matt, good to be with you. And those dots are all connected. We think about the fact that this rating agency earlier this summer said essentially there's too much debt and the government is dysfunctional. And there you just heard the House Speaker talking about members of his own party wanting to burn it all down. It's quite remarkable. And unfortunately, obviously he's using an analogy. It's not a literal reference, but the effect is in a sense the same, in the sense that we're talking about shutting the government down, a partial shutdown. Essential services will continue. This has happened at the hands of the Republican dysfunction now 3 times previously over the past decade, and it's costly. It's costly for the people who rely on the federal government for their incomes. I'm talking about federal employees and contractors, and it costs the economy because there is lost output, as well as the fact that there are going to be some people parted from their money in the near term, let's say, as compared to when the government's functioning as normally as it does. So it's counterproductive. It's frankly stupid.
What's the worst case scenario here? Are we talking default?
No, these are 2 different things, Matt. Where default would be a catastrophic development that would be unprecedented for the U.S. Government, for the U.S. economy and the global economy. That's where the government no longer is making good on its debt. This will be more of a short-term affair, we hope. We don't know how long it will go. Last time was about a month. The previous episodes were shorter than that. But it's still dysfunction. It adds to uncertainty in the economy when we have plenty of uncertainty already. We have an auto strike that could lead to interruption in production of automobiles. It's already doing that to some degree, could lead to additional inflation. And so it's just so unnecessary. And, ask yourself the question, if you had a list, by your own opinion, of the major problems that the federal government has been able to resolve in recent years, how many of those boxes would you check off? And I think you'd be checking off relatively few. There is a long list of problems to be addressed, and this is where they're drawing the line in the sand, really for no good reason.
Well, Mark, maybe a nice long weekend will get everyone on the same page. Mark Hamrick, thank you so much.
We can pray. Thank you, Matt. All the best.
All right. Well, as Congress deals with political dysfunction in the fight over government spending, a story of political corruption surfacing on Capitol Hill today. New Jersey Democrat Senator Bob Menendez and his wife were indicted on bribery charges tied to the Egyptian government. The indictment charges the pair with taking bribes of cash, gold bars, and a luxury vehicle in exchange for a range of corrupt acts. Among other allegations, Menendez, who said he will step down as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is charged with providing sensitive information to Egyptian officials. Well, coming up, the border between Texas and Mexico is in a critical state. How a fresh wave of migrants is adding to the humanitarian crisis. Welcome back. Hundreds of migrants are arriving at the U.S. southern border, even as an increase in recent numbers prompted U.S. officials to close several border crossings. The Biden administration announced new policies this week to handle the surge of migrants crossing the southern border, including granting temporary legal status to hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans who are already in the country. Charlene Aaron has more.
After growing pressure to do more on the country's immigration crisis, President Biden is taking action. The White House granting temporary legal status to an estimated 472,000 Venezuelans who arrived in the country as of July 31st, making it easier for them to get work in the U.S. It's a key demand of Democrat mayors and governors who are struggling to care for an increased number of migrants in their care.
There's no end in sight. We don't know, when it's going to end.
New York City is currently paying to house 60,000 newly arrived migrants, and more could be on the way as the southern border sees a new surge. Eagle Pass, Texas, now declaring an emergency, with 2,500 migrants arriving yesterday alone. And hundreds of migrants were seen riding on top of this Mexican train heading north. The administration is also sending 800 Defense Department personnel to the border, in addition to the 2,500 National Guard members already deployed to help Customs and Border Protection. Plus, it's widening protocols to deport more families under an existing program. From New York to Illinois to Arizona, states have been overwhelmed with a surge of migrants. buses filled with immigrants arriving daily. In San Diego County, Border Patrol forced to release about 4,000 migrants in just the past week. Processing centers and shelters are filled to capacity. Frustrated local officials demanding action from Washington.
This isn't a political situation. This is not a left or right issue. This is an immigration system that has failed. As a county, we are not resourced to handle this many people, coming in.
Meanwhile, Chicago is also struggling to cope with the migrant surge. The city is now spending $29 million to build tent camps for migrants. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Coming up, a new book for working moms, how corporate America and the church can do better, when we come back. All right, here's the message from former Good Morning America anchor Paula Faris for working moms. You don't have to carry it all. In her new book, she's calling on women to ditch mom guilt, and she offers them a better way forward. She also told CBN's Jenna Browder that corporate America and the church should do more to support working moms.
And we are back now with the family that has captivated the world.
She's one of America's most well-known journalists.
Paula Faris! I love you all!
In 2014, Paula Faris began her tenure on ABC's Good Morning America Weekend and The View, a woman at the top of her game. Then in 2018...
While Paula's moving on from GMA Weekend, she's still going to be a huge part of the ABC team.
She decided to pump the brakes and asked to step away from those duties to a reporter role.
I felt like I wasn't seeing my husband or my kids. I wanted to be with my children. My schedule was just really crazy.
1 year later, ABC News chose not to renew her contract. Faced with a decision about what to do next, she chose a less familiar path.
I really decided to try something new, which is why we kind of blew up our lives and hit that great big reset button. We moved to a small town in South Carolina, where my sister lives, and I decided to pursue a company of my own.
The first words that pop into your mind about what it's like to be a working mom.
Based on her own experience, Paula started Carry Media to advocate for working moms.
And I just saw how women were treated once they became mothers, how they were valued less and scrutinized and penalized for having children instead of just being celebrated.
Fast forward to 2023, and she's out with a new book. You don't have to carry it all. Ditch the mom guilt and find a better way forward.
Two questions. What is mom guilt for you, and why the title?
Yeah, I mean, mom guilt, it's not just for me. Like 80 to 90% of mothers suffer from some level of mom guilt. And it's just never feeling like we're enough, like we're never present enough, we're not a good enough mom. We're always projecting some sort of guilt upon ourselves. And so much of that is because in America, motherhood isn't really celebrated. And there's not a lot of support for being a mother. In other countries, I found something that blew my mind was that mothers globally not only have to work, but they take a lot of pride in working and helping to contribute to the home. But on the other side of that, the attitudes in other countries towards children and families are so much better. Here in America, it's like, oh, your kid? Your problem. Figure it out.
Paula calls the book practical and tactical and starts with a history lesson to show moms how to ditch that guilt.
I nerded out in one of the chapters about the history of American families. And so often we think, let's go back to the 50s and 60s, the good old days. And, we have nostalgia for the past. I was guilty of that too. But in researching the history of American families, I learned that the most traditional family in America was when the husband and wife, the mother and the father, they co-produced together, they raised the children together. And of course, women didn't always have the same amount of rights that we do today, but they were working together. They were raising the children together. That's the most traditional family.
When it comes to corporate America, Paula says working moms add tremendous value. In recent years, there have been some big steps forward, including more flexible and remote work, paid family leave, and efforts to bring women's salaries in line with men's. Still, Paula says there's more to do and lists some other ideas, like providing affordable childcare and establishing more moms in positions of leadership. A born-again Christian, Paula includes a chapter on the church.
I struggled with working outside of the home because of, the messages that I heard from church and my faith circles. And so I tackle that in the book too. It was a really hard chapter for me to write, but it's very freeing about what the scriptures actually say about women, mothers, our role in society at home and at work.
In her research, she talked to the head theologian at Proverbs 31 Ministries, who points out that in the beginning, man and woman labored together. They divided tasks and responsibilities equally. He gives many examples of women working outside the home, including Deborah, a judge and prophetess in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, Priscilla and Phoebe. He also highlights the Proverbs 31 woman.
But I learned that the Proverbs 31 woman, who we often reduce to a domestic housewife, was actually a skilled businesswoman and negotiator. The security of her community was on her shoulders. She was a manager. She bought a field with her earnings. And so often we have weaponized work as if this isn't part of God's plan. But that's not the case. And that's where I think the church can do a lot better, is just celebrate that, look, the best families are when both the mother and the father are actively involved. We're raising the children together. We're co-producing.
Paula makes the case that the scriptures give sound reason and even permission for women to work outside the home and embrace their God-given ambitions. That's what she says she's trying to do through her company and this new book. And she hopes it encourages others to do the same and bring about a more mom-friendly work culture.
End of the day, what I'm trying to do, yes, advocate for mothers in the workforce, but I'm really hoping that it strengthens families. We say we're a family-friendly country, but our policies and our attitudes say something totally different.
Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Oh, some good advice for all moms there. Well, coming up, the astonishing story of a baseball superfan captivating crowds at stadiums across the country with his feet. After this. Finally tonight, an incredible baseball story, born without arms. Tom Willis never let that reality stop him from pursuing his dreams.
I step back, bring this leg up.
Incredible. The baseball fan since boyhood taught himself how to throw a ball with his foot. Now he's thrown out the first pitch at nearly every baseball stadium in America. Willis set to hurl out one more toe toss at Angels Stadium in Anaheim, hitting all 30 stadiums in Major League Baseball. He's hoping to do that next year. And what better way to end on a Friday? Some inspiration. That'll do it for us here at Faith Nation. Have a great weekend.